Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn. And on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons that they've learned throughout the course of their business and share them with us so that we can learn as well. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everybody hates. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, or endless social media posting. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, our special guest is Kevin Jordan. He is the owner of Kevin Jordan Coach, where he provides executive, career, and leadership, individual and group team coaching, and advising, training, and facilitation. So, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really great pleasure having you here. And I want to start off by asking you a question that I always love to start off asking, which is this. If you somehow were able to go back in time and start over in your business, but knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in the first 12 months?
I think I would spend a little bit more time having talked to people who have done what I've done or done things adjacent to me. I did a little bit of that, but I learned some things the hard way kind of as I went through. And I went for it. I was prepping for this for a while, but then there was sort of kind of a moment and it just kind of dove in and did it. And I think I would have probably taken a little bit more time just to kind of investigate, ask a few more questions. I was pretty sure, but there was just nothing huge, but just some things I think if I had in retrospect, I would go back and kind of like, yeah, I'd probably talk to that person a little bit more, maybe get a little more advice here, maybe slow down a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any particular, was there a reason why you didn't ask more, or is it you just didn't know what you didn't know at the time?
I didn't know what I didn't know. I'd never been a solopreneur before, so I'd never run anything. I'd been pretty intrapreneurial in the context of other organizations.
Yeah.
So really where my lessons learned were less on the content delivery side of what I do, but more on the business of running a business, in terms
Yes.
of, making sure you have a good bookkeeper and a good accountant and making sure that you have a good business plan for the year and stuff that I knew of and knew about, but that, you just if you haven't practiced the discipline of doing that a lot before, or I've done it in different contexts, it just my learning curve was a little bit longer than it could have been. And
Yeah.
I don't, I don't regret what I did. I mean, I think I landed in a pretty good spot. But if
Yeah.
I were going to wave the wand again and kind of take a rewind, I would spend more time really investigating and asking things about, I'm not really sure about that. Should I maybe spend some more time there and kind of just check in
Mm.
with people? And but some of the things you don't know what you don't know till you get into it. And that was sort of part of the adventure too. It's like, oh, okay, I made that mistake. Now, what I learned, don't beat myself up too much for it, and then kind of move on. So
Yeah. What's the lessons you've learned from that that you're implementing now in kind of the more established stages of your business?
yeah, so I take much more time toward the end of the year and the beginning of the year to really do big reflection on like what worked, what do I want to do differently going into each year. I'm not so much a resolution guy, but I'm always kind of processing and I like to use big milestones. So I do this in the quarters too, just kind of like those are kind of mini, I call them like mini business reviews, if you will, just
Sure.
with myself. My wife's great. She's not part of the business, but she's sort of my informal partner. So we talk a lot and she runs things by me. And we'll look at the finances, we'll look at the client mix, we'll look at kind of what am I just interested in. I started out doing, individual coaching. I got more interested in group and team over time. That was an evolution of the business. Some of that was just a curiosity. Some of it was just like trying it out and practicing, right?
Yeah.
So it's really being much more intentional and deliberate throughout the year with kind of major checkpoints. And then being more thoughtful about, is this really working? And if it's not, can I take it away? What would it take to kind of
Mm.
stop that? If I need to do something different, what would it take to add that?
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that. What, as you have grown and scaled in what you're doing, Kevin, what's been the hardest part of scaling and growing without falling into that trap that so many do, where you become like salesy and spamming your approach?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a solopreneur, so there's only one of me. So the hardest part is the thing I'm best at is the service delivery side. It's all the people stuff. The thing that I keep learning at and makes me the most uncomfortable is the business side, and especially the pipeline development and the sales development. And so I've gotten a lot better at it. I've gotten a lot more comfortable at it. It's still not my greatest strength. And if I had to choose between the two, I would do the people delivery till every time, without
Yeah.
fail. So it's finding that, I won't even say balance because it's not so much a balance, it's that integration of how do you do pipeline development, prospecting, you know, um, sales type things in a way that feels good to me, to your point, not being
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
schmaltzy and spammy. That's just not what my kind of thing. I don't like to do that.
Yeah.
I don't like to receive it. I don't like to do that
Yep.
to other people. And so figuring out what is that authentic quote sales voice in the context of doing the work that I love, which is actually once I land the contract or land the work, the delivery side. And I've gotten more comfortable with that through two ways. One, I coach a lot of sales clients, so they're not asking me for sales advice. It's more about in the context of leadership development usually, but I learn a lot from them about sales things.
Yeah.
And two, just talking with other business owners, other people who are in my usually one person shops. Like, how do you navigate this? So in my world, some people like to do what I do, which is not be too dependent on third party firms. I do some work with third party firms and I like those relationships, but I have other colleagues that that's the main source of their business and income. And so they sort of go as the firms go, right? And I always felt like when I started out, that was a great way to start because it got me established and I got going. But I was always worried about kind of the proverbial having too many eggs in one basket sort of thing. And so, and we've seen in the last year or two in particular, wide variations and fluctuations in the market, different businesses doing better than others, not just because of
Mm.
AI, but just the total economic landscape, going around the world right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it will always be a source of good struggle for me to navigate that sales kind of tension, good tension with
Yeah.
the service delivery. Because like I said, if I could take my choice, I will always do the client side work first.
Yeah.
That's just it's where I get the greatest joy, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
closing
Yeah.
a deal, but that's like, okay, I did it. Now the fun parts, because now it's the relationship I get to develop with somebody. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Which, it's one of the things we're all about is that relationship led element of it. Because a lot of business owners, they don't like the building the pipeline and feeling like they're selling to people. So I totally get that. Which leads me on to another question here. Like, what have you found has been, or what's the one thing that you've changed in how you build relationships with your initial prospects that makes that whole sales process feel easier? Because at the end of the day, we still have to sell, but we
yeah.
don't have to do it in a way that's, gross.
Yeah, exactly. I like that gross. Um, so one of the main things I do is for people that we have a really good engagement with, I ask for a recommendation either on my website or on my LinkedIn profile.
Mm,
Along with that, I usually ask for referrals from existing clients. So most of my work is non-ad, non-generated through other sources other than existing and former clients. So the big thing I'm trying to do is I treat every engagement for that particular person like it's their special time, it's their special thing. We're going to do what they want to do. And I'm also thinking about who do they know and how can they serve me? Because oftentimes many people I work with have either had coaching in the past or they know of other people who have had coaching. So it's not a big new concept for a lot of people. And they're more than willing to be helpful, especially if they've had a good experience. So, if I get someone like Jason comes to me and says, "Hey, I worked with Susie and she told me all these great things," and that sort of resonates with me. Well, like 80% of my job is sort of done already. It's more about how do Jason and I click, just sort of that chemistry wise. And then what is the nature of the engagement in terms of timing and cost, right? So I'm a big relational guy in a non-schmaltzy way. So I want people to, if they've had a good experience, I'm not going to also miss the opportunity to proactively ask them to tell others about that because it's going to mean more for somebody to hear it from you than it will be from me.
yeah.
That's just who we are as humans, and I get
Yeah. Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and so, if um, people have other opportunities or they have other referrals and recommendations they want to make, I'll also listen to those too because sometimes my clients are thinking about stuff that I'm not, so they'll bring me ideas like, hey, would you ever do an engagement like this,
Mm,
maybe, maybe not, it just depends. And if I
yeah.
can't or I won't, I have a big enough network of other people. I want to refer that out. So at the end of the day, I want to make sure the client gets whatever they need, if it's coming from me or from someone in my network as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. That's really, really good. I love that. Well, one of the other things I'd love to ask, Kevin, is around challenges in business because we all have them. Oftentimes, we are in a place where feel very lonely. We think it's just me. I'm the only person that ever has this problem. And so I like to kind of normalize this a bit. And so the question around that is this: what's the biggest challenge that you've faced so far in your business? And what's the lesson that you've learned from that?
I think the biggest challenge was during COVID, actually, because my business started in 29. I had a part-time practice for quite a few years, but my full-time practice in 20 started in 2019. So almost a year to the date when COVID was declared a thing, right? And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I lost some business. I mean, some clients got laid off, some people got furloughed, some people just said, "Hey, I want to do this, but I'm because I have some people pay out of pocket, some people pay through the organization. I want to pause right now." And I almost panicked, but I didn't. And so it was really holding the course during those first 3 to 4 months and taking a strategic bet that organizations would figure out they still need to do people development. They still need to help people kind of get to that next level. People who were coming to me on their own would come back, and they did. There was about a quarter there where it was kind of, but they did. And so part of it was like staying within my own self and believing that what I had to offer had value, and that just because it wasn't being quote unquote rewarded right now didn't mean it wouldn't be again at some point. And
Mm,
so I wrote it out, and there were some people that just they wanted to keep going. So I had enough from a pipeline and a revenue perspective to kind of keep moving along, not where I want it to be, but enough to kind of keep going. And things turned around. And then I saw some of that in 2025 kind of coming out of, the election cycle and coming in. There was a lot of just organizations in particular sort of felt like they were kind of holding their breath, like, well, what's tariffs and the economy and all these things. And so
mm,
didn't feel as intense during the COVID period, at least for me, but it was
yeah.
that there was echoes of that of like, okay, people are
Yeah.
pausing, or people are like, hey, Kevin, this all sounds great. Let's talk in 3 months or 6 months, and like,
Yeah.
okay. And some of those ended up closing just fine. It just took that natural cycle. Some didn't,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
coming into 2026, I've been cautiously optimistic, and that's been sort of rewarded, in terms of like it's,
Yeah.
kind of we get through January, things are picking back up again. So, I think it's when you get in those sort of darker days, especially when you're by yourself, and I didn't actually have the narrative of I'm the only one going through this. It's just like I'm just in this, though, for me in my context here. I can talk to other people, but how do I navigate through my days when sometimes, there was more white space in the calendar than I otherwise would have wanted?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not seeing that as a referendum on the value that I have to offer or have offered, but rather like, hey, everybody's going through lots of weird stuff right now. And
Mm,
and how do we actually almost double down on the empathy for that and like, hey, okay, talk to me in a couple months. That's right, that's great. And just kind of
yeah.
keeping those channels open and coming back
Yeah.
to the non super salesy, schmaltzy relational stuff. Like people who know me and work with me know that that's not who I am. So if I say I'm going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
follow up and like truly be connected to people, because in my practice, we look at the whole person. I mean, I'm looking to understand the totality of the Jasons of the world.
Yeah.
Then they know it's not like I'm just kind of coming around for like, well, here's Jordan again, just trying to like get me to sign the thing, right? Like, no, I don't feel good about that. I mean, that's just like
Mm,
so. That has probably been kind of the biggest challenge is sort of kind of staying in my lane, staying within myself, and just feeling confident that I had something to offer, and
yeah.
things would turn. It just wasn't going to turn
Yeah.
on my. I mean, it's kind of the wasn't going to turn on my timeline.
Yeah, yeah. But the great thing that I love hearing about that is even in those times, because everything in life is cyclical, and even in those quote unquote down times, you stayed consistent. You just
Yeah,
kept moving forward, and I see so many businesses, no matter how long they've been going, they just stop the consistency of stuff in
yeah,
downtime, and then they wonder why it's not picking up. It's like, well,
right,
you didn't plant the seeds in the time when you needed to plant them. So
right.
that's amazing, man. I love that. Well, talking about what you've been doing and in that consistency, what's the goal over the next 2 years? What would you like to achieve?
So last year, well, every year I'm a big believer in doing some professional development for myself. And so last year I took on a team coaching program, got my certificate, not my I passed through the class, if you will, got the accreditation for it. So I'm really looking to offer more and more outside of just the individual space, more in the team space. And that could be multiple individuals on a team, it could be the team as a collective, and
Hmm.
also group coaching. I've been doing more of that. So that can be organized more around a theme of maybe it's better delegation, better communications, having harder conversations, but with a group of different people across organizations. So both of those allow me to both do facilitation type work, which I love, coaching type work, which I love, and they offer more economical options for people because one-on-one is the most expensive. It's where I get the most joy. It's where I think I can have the biggest impact. But I come out of an operations background in healthcare. So there's also an appeal to do things at scale and to do things at size. And so this is why I like, facilitating meetings or even doing trainings on leadership and management concepts. So more in that space, kind of taking the portfolio and widening a bit, not too far adjacent. This year in particular, there's a couple of projects that are more consultant-ish, kind of helping develop different types of programs with other few partners of mine, some consulting firms that have a coaching component, but there's also leadership development. So there's a programmatic approach. So kind of scratching some other itches in terms of like things that are people adjacent to what I do, but in the larger people space.
Yeah.
So, not particularly huge, but things that I feel good about and that kind of make the most sense for me in terms of that constant good tension of there's only one of me. And the more I say yes to is the other things I can't, say no to down the line, and so I want to kind of keep that in place. So I'm actually, I'm trying to say no to other things that I could do, but don't really fill my cup up a lot. And because I have a lot of
Yeah.
interest. And so this is always a hard thing for me, especially being one person. Some of those interests just won't ever take the form of a business plan or
Yeah.
model. It's just going to be an interest. And that's okay, but I've had to
Yeah.
kind of learn that lesson too. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Well, for people that are looking to get in touch with you, Kevin, what's the best way for them to do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can find me at my website, Kevin Jordan Coach. And you can email me directly, kevin@kevinjordan.coach. And so it's pretty straightforward. And I'm usually respond within 24 hours or so. So
Amazing, amazing. Well, definitely recommend everyone checking out Kevin on the different places he just mentioned there as well. And Kevin, thanks so much for taking the time out, being on the show today, sharing some great, great bits of wisdom from your experience in business. So thank you again for being on the show. And as a reminder for everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.